Good evening, Americans, and welcome to the Ed Show live from New York. I'm ready to go. Let's get to work.
A dramatic development in the saga surrounding rancher Cliven Bundy. This is a welfare cowboy. The FBI is on the case now.
You've got to believe that something is brewing here, no?
A formal investigation into alleged death threats, intimidation, and possible weapons violations. Many in the crowd had pointed weapons at officers.
These people are waiting for the big federal apocalypse.
If we're here to make a stand, then by heaven's sakes, let's make a stand.
They're waiting for the big war.
Do the hard things and stand up and do what's right and tell the federal government that we've had enough.
There's going to be consequences.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Let's roll it back just a little bit. Remember Occupy Wall Street? You remember how the conservatives just loved to degrade those kids that were out there trying to change the conversation in America? And that is exactly what they did. No, they didn't get any laws passed. So they were out there at the park here in New York, and they got a lot of attention. It did change the subject in America, and it made America focus on some things that were very, very important. The 99%, Occupy Wall Street. I remember how the conservatives treated them. Well, let me ask you this. How do you want to treat this group right here? You could easily look at what is happening out west as just a product of the conservative talkers and conservative media in this country that really want us to find a boogeyman when it comes to any kind of government regulation or control. Supporters of the racist freeloading rancher Cliven Bundy, well, they're back at it again. And they are, in my opinion, officially out of control. A few weeks ago, Fox News planted the seed that started this rogue movement. Fox News devoted countless airtime promoting Bundy as, what was it? I think it was a great American hero. That's what he was. Fox bailed on their hero once they found out that, well, he's a racist. But it was too late. The Bundy movement has blossomed into a weed that really no herbicide can kill. They have armed, they've been armed. They've aimed rifles at federal agents. They set up roadblocks, perfectly good citizens out there abiding by the law. They've intimidated reporters. They put their foot down, drawing their line in the sand, so to speak. This weekend, Bundy supporters staged a protest against the Bureau of Land Management in Recapture Canyon, Utah. I thought I had heard of Recapture Canyon, Utah, and I thought it had a lot to do with Native Americans, and sure enough. These protesters, what they did was that they rode their ATVs in opposition to the BLM's closing of certain trails in the area. Now, the group is also upset about some slow approval over some new trails that might be out there. Overall, the theme in Recapture Park was very, very simple. These people are upset with the federal government.
I've been back in here when I was in high school with my flat fender back in through here, and I know we've been here forever, and then for a governmental agency to just acquire it, just take it over and say it's not yours anymore. That's really frustrating.
That's what we're here for, is to do the hard things and stand up and do what's right and tell the federal government that we've had enough.
The message here is that we're frustrated, there's a problem, and federal government is doing nothing to solve it. But at the same time, we're not bad actors. We're not looking to cause problems. We're not looking for violence.
Really? Well, some of the protesters, well, they were peaceful and followed the rules. There were no arrests or confrontations at this event. Others showed up with armed assault rifles. That had to make everybody feel good. And they broke the law. They rode ATVs on closed trails. The trails ran through sacred Native American cultural lands of the Navajo Nation.
The rally also attracted people unafraid of confrontation. Armed militia members from other states showed up. Cliven Bundy's son Ryan and his family rode their ATVs into the banned area. He says staying in the BLM designated area doesn't make any sense.
Doing that accomplishes absolutely nothing. It basically shows cowardice towards the federal government, shows cowardice towards the Bureau of Land Management. If we're here to make a stand, then by heaven's sakes, let's make a stand.
What kind of stand are you talking about? Leave it to a Bundy to break the law. The BLM will pursue charges against people who violated laws on Saturday. There's no doubt tensions are running high out west. Last week, a federal cattle wrangler was threatened by masked men. Men wearing hoods pulled up to a BLM employee and showed him a sign that read, "You need to die." One of the men then pointed a handgun at the BLM wrangler. After the threat, the men drove away. There was no evidence linking the masked men to Bundy's supporters. But doesn't it make you wonder what's going on here? But we all know where this anti-government sentiment started, don't we? The FBI is currently investigating the armed standoff which occurred near Bundy's ranch back on April 12th. They are looking into threats against law enforcement officers, illegal weapons, and anti-government militias. The seed of hate against the federal government, it's growing out west, and things are getting worse. More and more people are joining the ranks to protest the Bureau of Land Management. It can be blamed on one thing, as I see it, and that is the conservative media. You see, the conservative media hates Barack Obama so much and can't stand the liberal platform so much that they want to view them as a threat. And the best way to do it is to give the microphone to people like this, platform them up for 2 weeks on a cable network. Don't back down until there's unrefutable evidence that the guy is a racist. Well, we'll forget about that. So now we have got government officials in this country wondering, what do we do if we go out and try to enforce the law and people are openly armed with assault weapons? These folks, I think, want something to happen. They want the government to react so they can react, and then who knows what the hell's going to happen. So how do we diffuse all of this? Maybe it would be good if the network in question that was so in love with Cliven Bundy would say something to these folks who are illegally on the land with the ATVs. You know, maybe you ought to back up and go through the normal channels of protest. Do you have representatives in Washington? Where do they stand? Are they with this crowd? Because no one knows where this is going to end, and no one knows how it's going to end. And it's kind of scary. It has the roots of a movement that won't end really peacefully. I hate to say that, but this is how it goes, isn't it? If they were minorities, would they be fired upon? Would they be forced to abide by the law? And are we now seeing a culture develop in America? Well, you can go ahead and do what you want. We'll just decide which law we're going to uphold. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: has the conservative media fueled a dangerous anti-government sentiment? Text A for yes, text B for no to 67622. You can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. For more, let me bring in Brian Maffley of the Salt Lake Tribune. Mr. Maffley, good to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time. You were out at this protest over the weekend. Were Bundy supporters a big presence in all of this?
Yeah, I think they were. It was more of a local protest, but they showed up from Bunkerville, maybe others from other militia groups, but they certainly made their presence known. Why would they show up? Did you interview them and talk to them at all about why they were showing up out of their area, so to speak? Well, I certainly tried. They had little interest in talking to me, and frankly, they're pretty openly disdainful of the media. What did you want to do when you were there? What did you want to ask them, and what did you not get out of them that you wanted to get out of them? I was very interested in why they, traveled to Utah and wanted to participate in this event, and why they felt it was necessary to come armed. Now, what role did a county commissioner play in this? Well, that's an interesting question. Phil Lyman helped organize this event, but he oftentimes would say, "I'm not organizing it," but he really did help stage it and was the MC at a rally ahead of time. So he played a very important role, but we have to be very clear he was doing it as a private individual. Okay, doing it as a private individual, but making a public appearance
as an elected official. I mean, you know, you're 24/7 as an elected official. He's a county commissioner who reportedly has taken the same position of Cliven Bundy when it comes to recognizing the federal government. Is that characterized properly?
I don't know if Lyman would go that far. But Lyman's position is that the federal government needs to let the counties have more say, more control over the public lands in their counties. In San Juan County, it's at least 90% federal land there. A large part of that is because of the Navajo reservation, but it's mostly federal. And they're a little concerned that they are being shut out of the decision-making. And that's, in large part, what motivated that protest on Saturday.
Well, what has changed? Because the ATVs have not been allowed on these trails for some time, I understand.
That's right. It was closed to ATV use in 2007, and what prompted that was the discovery that a trail had been constructed through there, and it had done damage to a number of archaeological sites. This area had been occupied about 1,000 years ago by the ancestors of the Puebloan people like the Hopi and the Zuni. And it is incredibly rich and dense with archaeological sites. So what happened was they found this damage to these sites, and they, a year later, decided that it was best to keep it closed to ATV use to preserve those sites.
So the Bureau of Land Management made a decision because the land was misused not to allow the ATVs to go in there anymore, to respect the rights of the Navajo Nation, correct?
That's correct, but they were reviewing an application ever since that the county had made to establish a right-of-way right through there. And they were trying to figure out, well, how can we route that trail in a way that would not impact those sites? That's dragged on for several years, and the political leaders in that county have pretty much lost patience.
So we can only speculate why people out of the region showed up at a local protest. As a professional reporter, how would you characterize it?
That would be pure speculation, but I think they identify the recapture protest with this larger movement to defy federal authority.
Okay. Brian Maffley, good to have you with us tonight from the Salt Lake Tribune. I appreciate your time. Let me bring in MSNBC contributor and former Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer. Governor, good to have you on tonight. Your thoughts on what would settle all of this down? You've done a lot with, you know, Bureau of Land Management as a governor, being involved in situations like this. What scares you about this? What would diffuse it?
Well, even more important, as you know, Ed, I'm a third-generation rancher here in Montana, and I have a master's degree in soil science, so I understand these resources. Leading up to the Dust Bowl, it was folks out west that used the land for whatever they wanted, for as long as they wanted. They overgrazed their cattle, they diverted the rivers, and it created the Dust Bowl. And so now we have professional managers who are managing your land. This land belongs to the United States of America. It belongs to somebody in New York just like it belongs to somebody in Utah. And what these professional managers are doing on the ground is saying, what is good for the resource? How many cattle would we allow to graze here? Where is it appropriate to have ATVs? How can we best take care of this land as a trust for all Americans? And now this bunch, this Cliven Bundy bunch, coming over from Nevada giving advice to people in Utah on how to deal with the BLM, my God, that's like the Aryan Nation giving advice to Donald Sterling. I mean, this bunch, the Bundy bunch, are grifters. They haven't paid their fees. They haven't cooperated with the federal government. They say they don't even recognize the United States government. And these Tea Party, militia, foxtrotters, they're a bunch of ne'er-do-wells. They aren't ranchers. They aren't loggers. They aren't people that have legitimate businesses on the land. You wouldn't get ranchers to stand next to Bundy.
Yeah.
And people who are in the mining business, and the oil and gas business on federal land, they wouldn't stand next to these people because they make a living on that federal land, and they listen to the rule of the land.
So the ulterior motive here is to make the Bureau of Land Management and the government the boogeyman here. I mean, these people really aren't upset about any closed trails or any ATV access issues.
Well, they might be, but you know, there are millions of other acres that they can go to. Why do they have to have that trail? You know, some 30% of Montana is owned by the government. I think 60% or so of Utah, some 80-some% of Nevada is owned by the federal government. There are places all over the West to recreate. Some allow ATV, some don't. Some allow hunting, some don't.
Yeah.
Some allow grazing and oil development, some don't. So go to the places that the professionals have decided this is the place to do what it is that you like to do.
So, Governor, this seems to be the beginning of standard operating procedure. Just defy the law and wait for the government to do something. So what's the solution here? I mean, is the government just going to pick and choose what to do with these malcontents that show up with high-powered automatic rifles?
If you point a gun at law enforcement or federal officials, you should have no expectation of this ending good for you. Now, we don't want to have a confrontation with these folks. We just want them to go back home and cut wood or ride their motorcycle or whatever they do for a living. But if they continue, they're going to get rounded up and they'll be prosecuted. And as law-abiding citizens, we can't have it any other way. We're a land that has rule of law. We're not Yemen. We're not Somalia. We're a land that has laws, and we all have to follow those laws. We don't get to decide to which one we're going to follow and which ones we don't. That's what a civilized society does.
Well, and the scary element here is that that's what it seems to be evolving to. This is far from over. Governor Brian Schweitzer, good to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time. So they were out there at the park here in New York, and they got a lot of attention. It did change the subject in America, and it made America focus on some things that were very, very important. The 99%, Occupy Wall Street. I remember how the conservatives treated them. Well, let me ask you this. How do you want to treat this group right here?
Consequences.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Let's roll it back just a little bit. Remember Occupy Wall Street? You remember how the conservatives just loved to degrade those kids that were out there trying to change the conversation in America? And that is exactly what they did. No, they didn't get any laws passed. You could easily look at what is happening out west as just a product of the conservative talkers and conservative media in this country that really want us to find a boogeyman when it comes to any kind of government regulation or control. Supporters of the racist freeloading rancher Cliven Bundy, well, they're back at it again. And they are, in my opinion, officially out of
a formal investigation into alleged death threats, intimidation, and possible weapons violations. Many in the crowd had pointed weapons at officers.
These people are waiting for the big federal apocalypse.
If we're here to make a stand, then by heaven's sakes, let's make a stand.
They're waiting for the big war.
Do the hard things and stand up and do what's right and tell the federal government that we've had enough.
There's going to be
Good evening, Americans, and welcome to the Ed Show, live from New York. I'm ready to go. Let's get to work.
A dramatic development in the saga surrounding rancher Cliven Bundy. This is a welfare cowboy. The FBI is on the case now.
You've got to believe that something is brewing here, no?